When you truly break free from a narcissist's control, the moment of real victory usually does not look the way people expect. It does not come with a huge fight. It does not arrive through one last dramatic showdown. It is not some movie scene where they finally admit every lie, every game, every wound they caused. Real victory is often much stranger than that. It comes as silence, deep silence, not normal silence, not a short pause, not a break between arguments. I mean, complete silence that feels almost too quiet to trust. And if you have spent months, maybe years, inside the storm of narcissistic abuse, that kind of silence can feel unsettling at first. You get used to the noise. You get used to the texts, the emotional swings, the guilt trips, the pressure, the chaos, the repeated drama that always seems to restart. So when all of that suddenly stops, your mind does not know what to do with it. The battlefield that once felt so loud becomes still, empty, frozen. At first, that quiet may not feel like a win. It may feel confusing. It may even feel wrong. But stay with this, because this is where many people miss the truth. That silence can be one of the clearest signs that the game is over. And to understand why, you first have to understand what this silence is not. A narcissist uses silence as a weapon all the time. Many survivors know the silent treatment very well. But that silence was never peace. It was punishment. It was pressure. It was designed to make you panic, question yourself, and come back to restore contact. That was manipulation. That was control. That was part of the trap. The silence I am talking about here is different. It is not a cold move meant to trigger your fear. It is not ghosting to make you chase. It is not a short disappearance while they test someone else. All of those versions still expect a reaction from you. This silence does not. This one feels still because they have run out of moves. That is the difference. That is the shift. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Think about how a narcissist usually reacts when you start pulling away, when you set a boundary, when you stop accepting bad behavior, when you begin to see through the lies. They almost never walk away quietly in the beginning. Instead, they start trying one move after another. First, they may become kind again, softer, sweeter. Suddenly, they look like the person you always hoped they would be. They apologize. They promise change. They talk about healing. They bring up therapy. They remind you of old memories. They say the exact words you wanted to hear years ago. But most of the time, the goal is not real growth. The goal is access. If that does not work, the tone often changes fast. The warmth disappears. The anger shows up. The insults begin. The blame starts flying. They accuse you. They attack you. They become cruel because they can feel control slipping from their hands. And if rage does not pull you back in, a third move often appears. They begin talking about you to others. They twist the story. They damage your name. They paint themselves as the victim. They gather support. They recruit people around them to believe their version of events. The details may change, but the pattern stays the same. A narcissist who still believes they can affect you keeps trying. They keep pushing. They keep testing doors. Why? Because even conflict gives them something. An argument still connects you. A fight still proves they can reach your emotions. Your anger, your sadness, your need to explain, your wish to defend yourself, all of it tells them they still matter inside your world. And as long as that emotional door remains even slightly open, they believe there is still a way back in. This is why the stage before freedom often feels so intense. The more clearly you begin to pull away, the harder they may push. And this is also why the silence that comes later matters so much. Because when it finally arrives, it usually means something important has changed in you, not just in them. At some point, for many survivors, the fog begins to lift. The excuses stop landing. The manipulation becomes easier to see. The endless confusion starts to clear. You stop trying so hard to make them understand. You stop proving your value to someone who benefits from denying it. You stop fighting battles that were designed for you to lose. And most of all, you stop giving them full access to your emotional world. That is when the energy begins to shift. The old drama starts losing power. The hooks that once worked no longer catch in the same way. The strategies they relied on stop getting results. And then something remarkable happens. Everything gets quiet. The late-night messages fade. The angry calls stop. The attempts to provoke you slow down and then disappear. The cycle that once ran your nervous system into the ground suddenly falls silent. For many people, this quiet feels unreal. After living in constant emotional alert, your body may still expect another attack. You check your phone. You prepare for another message. You brace for another crisis. You think maybe they are planning something behind the scenes. Maybe another smear campaign is coming. Maybe the next storm is just delayed. But then A day passes, then a week, then a month, maybe more, and still nothing happens. Here is the part most people do not talk about. At first, peace can feel uncomfortable when chaos has been your normal. Calm can feel suspicious. Silence can feel unnatural. But that does not mean something is wrong. It may mean something is finally right. Manipulative people keep spending energy where they believe they can still get a result. If they sense guilt, they use it. If they sense fear, they press harder. If they sense doubt, they build on it. Every emotional crack can become an entry point. That is why your reactions always mattered so much to them. Anger could be used. Fear could be used. Defensiveness could be used. Confusion could be used. The moment you stop feeding that cycle, the whole structure begins to weaken. And when there is no opening left, the silence often becomes permanent. Some survivors reach a place where they stop playing the game at all. They no longer feel the need to explain every choice. They no longer rush to answer every false accusation. They no longer ask for validation from someone who was never going to give it honestly. Their boundaries become stronger. Their replies become fewer. Their emotional independence begins to grow. In a very real way, they become closed off to the old manipulation system. They stop giving positive emotional supply through love, praise, or attention. And they also stop giving negative emotional supply through pain, anger, or reaction. There is nothing left to pull from, nothing left to stir up, nothing left to control. When that happens, the chase starts losing value. The effort no longer pays off. The familiar buttons are gone. The old scripts stop working. The predictable reactions disappear. And many manipulators eventually shift their focus somewhere else. Not because they suddenly respect your boundaries, not because empathy finally appeared, not because they became healthy overnight. They often step back because the situation no longer gives them what they want. The silence that follows is easy to misunderstand. Some people think it means peace has been offered. Others think it shows maturity or acceptance. But many times it simply means they cannot get what they need from you anymore. And for a person whose identity leans heavily on feeling powerful, superior, or in control, repeated failure becomes hard to tolerate. Being ignored hits their image. Being unable to influence you shakes their sense of power. Being unable to pull you back forces them to face limits they do not want to face. So instead of staying close to that discomfort, they choose distance. Distance helps protect the image they have of themselves. Distance lets them keep telling the story that feels easier to live with. Maybe they say they left because they wanted to. Maybe they tell themselves you never mattered. Maybe they decide they found someone better. The exact story changes, but the reason beneath it often does not. The silence stays because the old path no longer works. And whether they admit it or not, they know it. That retreat can go deeper than most people realize. The hidden checking may slow down. The constant watching may stop. The attempts to gather information about your life may fade. Those invisible threads that once kept them connected to you begin to loosen and then disappear. Why? Because continued attention can expose something they do not want to feel. It can reveal that they are still affected. It can show that they are still emotionally tied to someone they claim they have moved past. It can expose the fact that they no longer have the influence they once depended on. So the silence becomes part shield, part story, part self-protection. And for the survivor, that silence carries a message that matters more than many people understand. It means the cycle has been broken. It means your boundaries are working. It means the access they once had is gone. Most of all, it means your emotional freedom is starting to become real. If you have reached this quiet, do not rush to fill it. Do not mistake the absence of drama for emptiness. Do not assume that peace is boredom just because chaos once felt familiar. For a long time, your survival may have depended on being alert. For a long time, your body may have expected conflict as if it were normal weather. For a long time, stillness may have felt unsafe. But stillness is not the enemy. Calm is not the problem. In many cases, calm is the goal you were fighting for without even knowing how much you needed it. The silence you once feared can become the place where healing starts. It becomes the space where your identity returns. It becomes the room where your confidence slowly rebuilds. It becomes the moment where your thoughts belong to you again. And over time, something surprising happens. You think about them less. You replay less. You analyze less. You look over your shoulder less. The person who once took up so much room in your mind begins to shrink, not because you forced yourself to erase them, not because you won one final battle, but because you stepped out of a system that only survived by keeping you emotionally trapped. That is why this silence matters. It is not loud, it is not flashy, but it is powerful. Sometimes the strongest proof of freedom is not one last apology. It is the fact that the noise has finally stopped. And when the noise stops for real, their absence begins telling a story all by itself. You no longer react in the old way. You no longer give the emotional access they depended on. You no longer join the endless cycle. Every move they used has failed. Every old trigger has stopped working. Every road back into your life has been blocked. They may never say that out loud, but on some level, they understand it. They understand that there is nothing left to control, nothing left to twist, nothing left to gain from the same old pattern. And this is where many people stop the story too early. They assume that once the narcissist goes quiet, the narcissist simply moves on and continues life exactly the same way as before. From the outside, that may even appear true for a while. They may look confident, they may act untouched, they may jump quickly into a new relationship, they may present an image of success, happiness, and complete indifference. But appearances are often misleading. When a person has spent years depending on outside validation to hold up a fragile inner world, losing a major source of emotional support can create damage that does not show immediately. What many survivors do not realize is this: healthy, caring, emotionally steady people often provide far more stability in a relationship than they know. During the relationship, you may have been carrying weight that was never yours. You may have absorbed emotional chaos day after day. You may have calmed conflict. You may have softened situations that were spinning out of control. You may have offered patience, understanding, reassurance, and balance again and again. Without even knowing it, you may have been the stabilizing force holding together far more than just the relationship. While you were trying to make it work, you were often acting like a buffer between their inner chaos and the outside world. You took in stress. You absorbed blame. You carried projection, confusion, and tension. You helped bring order back every time things started breaking apart. So when that support disappears for good, the effects may begin to show in places that seem unrelated at first. The structure they leaned on becomes weaker. The person quietly carrying the load is gone. And once that happens, what was hidden becomes much harder to hide. One place this often starts to show is in work or public life. The image they spent years building can begin to crack. The organized professional starts becoming inconsistent. The reliable employee begins missing key details. The confident leader makes careless mistakes. The charming coworker becomes harder and harder to work with. People who once admired their competence start noticing that something feels off. Deadlines are missed, projects slow down. Small issues grow into bigger conflicts. Disagreements become harder to smooth over. The charm that once covered everything no longer works the same way. Managers who once praised them may begin asking sharper questions. Coworkers who once overlooked certain behaviors start paying closer attention. That polished image takes constant effort to maintain. And without the same emotional support behind the scenes, maintaining it becomes more difficult with every passing week. This is the part many outsiders never see. What looked effortless was often being quietly supported by someone else's emotional labor. And once that labor is gone, the mask gets heavier. The role becomes harder to perform. The pressure builds. At the same time, problems often begin showing up in personal relationships too. New connections may start fast. Intense attachment may happen almost immediately. From the outside, it can look like they replaced the old relationship overnight and moved on just fine. But because the core patterns have not changed, the same problems often surface much faster. The mask slips sooner. Patience gets shorter. Frustration becomes easier to see. Emotional reactions grow stronger. The cycles that once took years to fully expose themselves may now appear much earlier. New partners notice contradictions. Friends start seeing inconsistency. People who once saw confidence begin seeing insecurity. People who once saw charm begin seeing control. People who once saw strength begin seeing instability. And once those patterns repeat enough times, relationships become harder to keep. Trust falls, arguments rise, distance grows. Some people quietly leave, others speak up. Either way, the trail of damaged relationships becomes harder to deny. And if you have ever wondered whether your absence mattered, pay attention to this part. Sometimes the real answer does not come from what they say. It comes from what begins falling apart when the person who kept things steady is no longer there. As the emotional strain keeps building, it often starts affecting daily behavior and even physical health. The person who once looked fully composed may begin to appear worn down. Their energy changes, their face changes, their routine starts breaking apart. Sleep problems become more common, stress becomes harder to hide, Mood swings become easier for others to see. Some people try to outrun these feelings through unhealthy habits. Others become more impulsive. Others throw themselves into distraction after distraction, trying not to sit with what is happening inside. The exact behavior can look different from person to person, but the deeper problem often stays the same. The emotional pressure keeps rising, and the stability they once leaned on is no longer there to absorb it. People around them begin noticing the difference. Friends become uneasy. Family members feel confused. Co-workers ask quiet questions. The changes grow harder to ignore. What once stayed hidden behind a polished image begins leaking into ordinary life. The gap between appearance and reality becomes more difficult to manage. The illusion weakens. The performance gets exhausting. And sometimes that pressure creates one more dramatic reaction. Instead of facing the damage, they choose escape. This is why some people suddenly make big changes to their environment. They leave familiar places. They pull away from social circles they once cared deeply about maintaining. They distance themselves from communities they worked hard to build. They move to a new city, a new state, sometimes even a new country. From the outside, it may look bold, fresh, exciting. They may call it reinvention. They may say it is growth. They may present it as freedom or a new chapter. But do not miss what may be happening underneath. Sometimes it is not about opportunity. Sometimes it is about leaving behind the places where the cracks started to show. Sometimes it is about getting away from the people who saw the truth too clearly. Sometimes it is about starting over where the old story can be rewritten. And if you have lived through this, you know how tempting it can be to watch, track, and decode every move. But this is the moment to remember something important. Their next move is no longer your job to understand. Your peace is. Because in the end, your victory was never supposed to be about destroying them. It was about getting yourself back. It was about stepping out of the fog. It was about no longer living inside reactions they could control. It was about waking up one day and noticing that your mind is quieter, your body is calmer, and your life no longer revolves around managing someone else's chaos. That is why the silence matters so much. It is not just their silence. It is the silence growing inside you too. The silence where panic used to live. The silence where guilt used to shout. The silence where endless mental replay used to keep you awake. And yes, there may still be moments when you wonder if it is really over. There may still be days when the old fear rises. Healing is not always smooth, but if the chaos is gone, if the hooks are gone, if the need to respond is slowly fading, then something real has changed. And that change deserves to be honored. Do not run back to noise just because quiet feels unfamiliar. Do not confuse peace with emptiness. Do not reopen doors that cost you your sanity just because the silence feels strange for a while. Give yourself time. Let the calm settle in. Let your nervous system learn that not every day has to be a war. Let your thoughts become yours again. Let your identity return in pieces if it has to. That is still progress. That is still freedom. And if you are at this stage right now, hear this clearly. The fact that the drama stopped does not mean your story got smaller. It means your life is opening up again. It means the cycle that once trapped you no longer owns the room. It means the old game has lost its grip. And sometimes that is the most powerful ending of all. No final speech, no perfect closure, no dramatic confession. Just the truth, slowly becoming visible in the quiet. The noise is gone. The control is broken. The cycle is over. And for the first time in a very long time, there's nothing left to fight, nothing left to prove, and nothing left to chase. There's only space now, space to heal, space to breathe, space to become yourself again. And that may be the strongest sign of all that you really defeated them for good.